Hello, everyone. My name is Jaeson Yoo. I'm the Chief Evangelist for Amo Labs. What I'm here to talk about today is combining blockchain for time series data. But before we go on, I think that our parent company background is kind of important because I want to tell you the story of how we came to face all of these problems. We're an IT security company. We've been around for 21 years. In 2007, we established R&D capabilities for IoT. And about 3 years ago, we started making revenue off of them. What we noticed with IoT, and amongst IoT projects, we do smart factory projects, we do smart energy projects, smart factory projects, but most of all, it's been cars. And what we noticed with cars is that there's tons of data. And what we also noticed about cars is that there's multiple ways to collect that data. And finally, the most important thing is that the user was not involved in any of these processes. So we came with the idea of using the blockchain as a compensation unit, a way to assign value to the data that's being shared, and use the blockchain technology. But the big problem that we came up with is that, as I mentioned before, there's tons of data. And this data needs to be recorded over a series of time, not just once, not file data, but a time series data. So this was our original challenge. Now, on the left side, on the left top, that's kind of where we started with. We saw all these car data being collected. We knew that the user was not being compensated or even being led into the process. So we think that it's inescapable, the clause, the premise that the data producer should be the data owner throughout the lifetime of the data. On a similar note, we think that access rights management is very important because you're not, like I said, you're not buying the data as a file. You're buying access to that data for a specific amount of time. So a data privilege ledger that allows the owner of the data to strictly control access to that data when someone is interested in it, we think is very important. The scalability is a problem that everyone's talked about. This is especially a very intense topic for us because of the amount of data that comes out. McKinsey said that the future connected car is going to have 25 gigs of data coming out every hour that is in operation. So that just kind of gives you an idea. So we have this concept of a distributed storage, to be able to cover this. And then continuous query is very important because we want to have an event index query to be able to access this data once it's stored. So this is what our blockchain design looks like. Number one, if you look on the top left, that's going to be for the coin transaction. So that's going to utilize a lot of the existing blockchain technology. But number two is what we're trying to create, and that's the data exchange market. The data privilege ledger, as I mentioned briefly earlier, will allow the data owner to be able to control access to his or her data through this data privilege ledger. Now the metadata has the hashed user information on it and some more private details that's going to make the data more valuable. But the metadata acts as an index to be able to access number 3, and that's the part that we are working on, and that's kind of a IPFS-like storage where all the data can be distributed. Now, as I mentioned before, time series data presents a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems is that we can't record every second, right? So we can't record and store every second of data. So collecting the raw data is one thing, but really the processing of that time series data into process data, and that's a term that we came up with, but process data means some sort of a data that's anchored on a condition. This could be time, this could be events, it could be a whole lot of different things, but using conditions to be able to take snippets of the time series data rather than the whole thing and trying to store the whole thing. And of course, this process data needs to be extracted back to the user. The user here is a little confusing because the user here would be the data consumer. So this would not be the person driving the car or riding around in the car. It would be the automotive company or the service provider that's interested in this, in acquiring this data. So what we're working on is something called a smart data contract. And I think the best way that I can describe this from a concept point of view is that this is going to be a smart contract that's going to be able to take this time series data and then process it. Once it's developed, we're going to provide the SDK for all developers. And then this process, the time series data gets stored into the IPFS like distributed storage, and the data privilege ledger, again, controls access to that data and also acts as metadata to be able to access the raw binary data. You know, I want to be fair to all the other speakers here. The timer's not on. Okay. Another technological hurdle that we're faced with and that we're working on right now is blockchain for time series data. Right now, there are blockchain-enabled decentralized storage facilities, but a lot of this is being used for data archiving and file-based data. So it's just me. If I want to store some of my data in a decentralized environment, and then I want to extract it, it's just for me. But what we're trying to do is put it up there and then have it available for other people, creating a marketplace. In order to do that, as you can see, there's a lot of different requirements that we have to go through. The timestamp-based indexing is this big one, as well as there's compression issues, and there's a lot of different issues that we need to overcome. And we're working on it, but we want to reach out to the community as well. So this is what our economy looks like. So on the left would be the data producers, and they would, with complete voluntary cooperation, they would upload their user data onto the AMO market, which is supported by the platform and the blockchain. All of this will be encrypted and de-identified as it goes into the blockchain. And then when the market participant on the right, those would be the people who would buy the data or would be interested, they would make key requests and get encrypted information and then get the encrypted data that they can access for a specific amount of time. Now, I brought this back here, and this is kind of like the crux of what we're trying to do. Number 1 and number 2 up on top to handle the coin transactions and the data transactions. And then the distributed peer storage would be a different layer that allows us to store all of the different data differently, also boosted by de-identification and encryption of the data. I think one thing that's really important to point out is 1 and 2 would have, all the nodes would be exactly the same. So this would be for more of a data integrity viewpoint. And then number 3, all the nodes would be different so that we can maximize the scalability features. And also there's privacy protection features as well, because we're separating the storage. Now there's a lot of different industries out there for disruption. The car industry is one of them. We want to use this time series data, and our first application is the car data market, but we think that technologically, the transfer to other IoT devices, considering that we're working on a giant IoT device that produces so much data in the first place, we think that the technology transfer to other IoT devices will be fairly smooth, but we want to use this as a test case and build this into a marketplace. We're launching the testnet early next year. I hope that you could find some interest in what we're trying to do and come check it out and participate once this testnet opens. I think one of our biggest assets is that we're 230 people. The parent company is 230 people, so we have a lot of engineers, but we can always use a lot more help from the community abroad. Every single presenter here is saying we're hiring. We're hiring as well. I don't know if any of you have worked or even been out in Korea, but it's an affluent city, it's a cosmopolitan city, and most importantly, it's a foreigner-friendly city. So if you have any interest, please look us up and let's work together to build a blockchain for time series data. Thank you very much.